So this video is based on market failure, but it's looking at how externalities can cause market failure. So to begin with, market failure occurs when there's inefficient allocation of resources in a free market. And this is going to be a series of videos looking at different types of externalities and how that can contribute towards market failure. So to begin with, what we're going to be looking at in this video is negative externalities. Now, negative externalities is a cost that is suffered by a third party as a consequence of an economic transaction. So what I mean by a third party, to begin with, you've got the first and second parties. That's the producer and the consumer. The third party includes any individual, organisation, property owner or resource that is indirectly affected, obviously in a negative way. So in this video, we're going to look at negative externalities via consumption and via production. So in this part of the video, we're going to be looking at why, with the consumption of cigarettes, the marginal private benefits would be greater than the marginal social benefits. Now, what I mean by that is for each additional unit being consumed, privately, in terms of the producer and the consumer, they are benefiting more than the third party. And what I mean by that, in terms of why it's causing market failure, is because this good is being overconsumed. And the overconsumption suggests that there's an inefficient allocation of resources towards this good being produced to be bought. So if we have a look at the diagram, now our focus is going to be on the benefits, and therefore we're going to be looking at the demand curves, because obviously the demand of those goods and why you demand those goods consider your benefit of that consumption. So we've got the marginal private benefit where it is being consumed at Q1. And the reason for that is because there's obviously demand because of the short-term benefits of smoking cigarettes. The producers are going to allocate resources towards it because they are generating large levels of revenue. But because of the spillover effects of consuming those cigarettes, it means that the marginal social benefit is less than the marginal private benefit. Now, for social efficiency to be achieved, it would have to be at the point of marginal social benefits equaling marginal social costs, which clearly it doesn't because the free market is operating at Q1 and not at Q2. And because of that, we've got a deadweight loss, again highlighting that inefficiency in the allocation of resources at Q1, where Q1 is being overconsumed because the benefits privately are greater than the marginal social benefits.
Over 80% of cigarette smoke is invisible. So no matter how careful you are, they still breathe in the harmful poisons. If you could see what's really there, you wouldn't smoke. Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
If you smoke around children, they smoke too. Every year, thousands of children have to go to hospital because of breathing other people's cigarette smoke.
So as we can see from those clips, there is a clear spillover effect of the consumption of those cigarettes. So for those in close proximity, they're experiencing secondary smoke and passive smoking. Now, obviously, if we left it to a free market and the government hadn't intervened like it has done in recent years, then there might not be age restrictions. There might not be bans in certain public places. There might not be a situation where there's packaging to try and put you off. And therefore, we start to recognise how it could be even more overconsumed. Now, this article, which was released in August 2021, highlights the economic cost of smoking. And if we consider the impact on healthcare and the healthcare provision and how we'd have to allocate more resources, or if we didn't have those resources, it would create obviously an opportunity cost where it might cause a burden on those who are needing healthcare and then unable to maybe get the experiences and the treatment that they require because of the allocation needed for battling such lung diseases which are caused by smoking. We can also think about the impact on absenteeism on the economy and national productivity. Obviously, with more health issues, there's going to be more absenteeism. With more absenteeism, people will not be working, and if people are not working, they're not producing towards national output, and that's going to have an impact on national productivity. So even though tobacco use has been declining in the UK for decades, 14.1% of UK adults still smoke, and many former smokers are living with the long-term effects of smoking. And that is going to have an economic cost on the environment, impacting the third party that have not directly been involved in the transaction regarding cigarettes.
Most of our economy is based on fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are coal, oil, and natural gas. Oil powers most of the transportation sector. Coal and natural gas power most of the electricity. Now, in the first couple decades of the 21st century, in order to sustain our dependence on fossil fuels, we're going to very risky, very extreme new sources. You see this in things like mountaintop removal for coal, fracking for natural gas, offshore drilling for oil, and the tar sands, which is the most devastating form of producing fossil fuels. They take away massive forests. The water in the streams and rivers is poisoned. It has severe impact on wildlife, on native communities, and it requires a huge amount of energy simply to get it to our fuel tanks.
So for this second negative externality, which is in production, what's key to remember is that the marginal social costs are greater than the marginal private costs. So that's for each additional unit being produced, the spillover effects is creating a greater external cost than to those involved directly in the production. Obviously, there will be a cost to firms in producing these goods, but the spillover effect and the cost to the third party is so much greater. And the reason why it's market failure is because there's an overproduction. In other words, they're allocating too many resources to producing these goods. So if we consider the diagram, we're going to look at it in terms of our focus on the supply curves because we're focusing on production. But if we've got a situation where, considering the clips earlier on, they're using fossil fuel for production. Now, fossil fuel seems to be much more accessible. There's a greater history of using fossil fuels, and therefore firms are much more efficient at obviously using fossil fuel as their source of energy. It is a cheaper source of energy compared to renewables. So in a free market, that is how they're going to produce because it'll be lower costs. But the more that's being produced, the more that they're extracting these fossil fuels, the greater the harm on the environment. And obviously all of those people living in the environment who are directly not involved in the production of those goods. The carbon emissions, for example, and the impact it's having on air pollution in those communities that might be nearby production plants, that spillover effect is going to be greater. So what we would want in a socially efficient economy is we'd want it where marginal social costs equals marginal social benefits at Q2. But in a free market, it's not going to be, it's going to be at Q1. And therefore there's going to be a deadweight loss with that inefficient allocation of resources.
The Cape Fear River runs down the eastern half of North Carolina, passing by major cities before emptying into the Atlantic Ocean. Right here, at the bottom of the river basin, is Wilmington, a city known for its iconic riverwalk. That's where you'll find this sign, describing the importance of this river to the region. It flows southeast for 200 miles, has the largest basin in the state covering more than 9,000 square miles, and drainage from 4 cities and runoff from factories, farms, and home sites in 29 counties flows into it. This river system provides water to the entire basin, and the Cape Fear is one of Wilmington's main sources of drinking water. A nationwide test of tap water recently ranked both Wilmington and neighboring Brunswick County in the top 5 for high levels of PFAS contamination, a group of chemicals found in many everyday products.
Anything that is water repellent in it, stain resistance in it, fire retardant, popcorn bags,
and dental floss and
pizza boxes, rain gear and sleeping bags,
food containers and makeup, it's everywhere.
Tracing the sources of chemicals in this North Carolina river tells you exactly how the water got so contaminated. And it also tells you how chemical companies are getting away with polluting our drinking water. Not just here, but throughout the United States.
So in this video, we focused on negative externalities. And what I just want you to remember is with consumption, the marginal private benefits are greater than the marginal social benefits. And therefore, in a free market, there would be overconsumption. With regards to production, the marginal social costs are greater than marginal private costs, and therefore the market failure, if left to a free market, would be overproduction. So next video, we will be looking at positive externalities.